computer. Okay. Okay, so the official recording is starting in on our YouTube page. We have also put the last video on there. So the Lighthouse Education Videos YouTube page, and we'll put this one on there as well. So we'll record, and these are just going to be, we're talking about the cane techniques, or what I call the flat ground cane techniques. So not going upstairs, not coming downstairs, but just all the techniques you might use just walking every day around the house, indoors, outdoors, just stuff like that. So last week we covered several. Does anyone remember any of the cane techniques we talked about the last time? I know it's been a couple weeks. Sorry about that.
The back and forth typing.
Okay, so the touch technique. So back and forth. And just to review that one, the touch technique, or 2-point touch, is when you're holding the cane in your hand is centered in front of the body, about 6 inches away. Your pointer finger is pointed down the flat portion of your cane handle. Your palm is facing to the side.
Really?
What's that?
No, I'm sorry. I'm talking to you, Nathan.
Oh, okay. No big deal. Your thumb is pointed, is up in the air. So your palm is not facing down. It's facing to the side. And you're tapping in an arc, back and forth, just wide enough to cover your body. So about 1 inch outside your shoulders on either side. And the cane will touch one side, and then it will go travel in the air to the other side and just tap, tap, tap back and forth. The goal is to keep the cane tip very, very low. So maybe not even 1 inch above the ground. It's just coming off the ground ever so slightly. And you want to keep your cane, it will touch the ground opposite of whatever foot is moving forward. So if you just took a step with the left foot, the cane will touch on the right side. And so the next step, it will move to the left side as your right foot comes forward. So it should be a very comfortable technique. Do you guys remember any of the other cane techniques we talked about last time?
The tap to it's not called a tap something. Forgot the name of that. When it's called, I forgot that other one.
Can you describe it a little bit?
It's like you try to tap something to know it's there.
Okay.
I can't think of that word name. Oh my God.
It's okay.
Oh
I'll go over the other ones.
Yeah.
So one is constant contact. So everything is exactly the same as touch technique, except the cane tip never leaves the ground.
That's what I meant.
That's the one. Okay.
Yeah.
And so it's constant contact. So it's just rolling back and forth. Everything else is the same. Your hand and arm position are the same. The arc width is the same. You're going to stay in step the same way, where it's going to sweep to the opposite side of whatever foot's coming forward. So if left foot moves forward, the cane moves to the right. Right foot moves forward, the cane moves to the left. So that's constant contact. And all that does, different than touch technique, is give you a greater understanding of what's underneath your cane at any given time. If you're using a roller ball or a rolling marshmallow, you can use this all the time. But if you're using a fixed tip, like a pencil tip or a marshmallow, then you're going to want to use touch technique, but you can switch to constant contact if you're looking for something in particular. Like, say, if you're searching for a landmark that's a grate on the ground, or something metal, you're looking for a metal plate on the ground, then you can switch to that constant contact and you have a better chance of finding it. But if you don't have a roller ball, that's why you would switch off. Even if you do have a rolling cane tip, say if you're crossing the street or you're walking along a really rough surface, like some of the roads in Florida are pretty rough, and you're walking on those rough roads, maybe you still want to switch to touch technique from constant contact. Maybe you want to just start tapping instead of keeping the tip on the ground, because you know it's just a really rough surface and you just don't want to deal with the constant contact rubbing on that cane tip the whole time.
Okay, Nate, give me a secret. I can go outside in a little bit for your, see if I wait for your stuff.
Okay. Were you talking to me, Mariano?
No, sorry, I was talking to my son for a second. I'm sorry.
No big deal. No big deal. Just wanted to make sure. I don't want to be ignoring anyone's question, but so that's the two: constant contact and touch technique. The other one we talked about was diagonal, which is that cane technique where you would hold the cane in one specific spot the whole time. You would never move it. It's only used in indoor familiar areas with no drop-offs. And all it does is it just kind of reserves your energy. So that way you're not using a whole lot of energy to use it. You're going to use it in places that you go all the time, that you want to have your cane with, but you don't want to deal with touch technique. So if you got really familiar with the Lighthouse and you were here all the time and you came inside and you were upstairs, you could use diagonal technique, which is your hand is, instead of centered off to the side, it's still in front of you about 6 inches. Your palm now is facing down instead of to the side. Your pointer finger is still pointed down the flat side of the cane, and it's diagonally across you and down. So it's going to be about 45 degrees from your arm to the cane tip on the ground. And all it does is just push along in front. And you could use that technique at the Lighthouse if you're familiar enough with where everything was at, and you wouldn't have to tap back and forth the whole time because you knew your way around. You're just kind of looking for bigger stuff with this technique. But again, if there are any drop-offs, you cannot use this technique because you could miss those drop-offs. You want to switch to touch. All right. So that's 3 of the techniques. We also talked about shorelining, which is just using any one of those other techniques, but you're following either a wall or the edge of the sidewalk. You're using something to walk along and use that as your edge.
I do that.
Yeah. So that's a great way to do it. I mean, if you don't want to wander off into somewhere into open space, find the edge, and you could use the shorelining technique.
Because Nathan,
Yep.
this is what I do with my cane. Like I stay on one side of the road, so that way, if a car comes, I will know it, and then the car will see me, and it will come to a complete stop, and they see me with my devices I'm using.
That's perfect. That's exactly what a shoreline is for, and that's the perfect way to use it. Sometimes you could use them. Hey, Latricia.
Hi, Latricia.
Hi, everyone.
Hello, Doctor.
Hi.
You could use that shorelining technique if you're walking along, and say, if you're walking on a sidewalk, you don't have to shoreline the whole time, because the sidewalk is going to keep you generally walking one direction.
Right.
But if you're looking for, say, the sidewalk at the end of the block, you would want to shoreline when you started getting close. So that way, you know, when the grass disappears in the sidewalk, you run into your sidewalk. That's what shorelining's for. And so when you're in a situation like that. But again, just one more tool. Don't use it all the time because it may actually get you into trouble, but it's a great tool to use sometimes. But that is the techniques we talked about: diagonal, touch technique, constant contact, and shorelining. And now we make our way into the new techniques that I didn't get to cover last time. So
Okay.
we got some new stuff. Woo! So what I'm going to start with is a technique that you can use with your shoreline. So it's a way to shoreline that is a little bit better for that technique. And it's called the touch and drag. So you have the touch technique, which you're tapping back and forth and your cane's always in the air, except when you get to the outside of your arc. And you have constant contact where the cane's always on the ground as you sweep it back and forth. The touch and drag is kind of like a hybrid of the two. So you're sliding your cane, you're dragging your cane to one side and it's on the ground, just from left to right, say. And then when you move from right to left, you're actually going to pick your cane up and move it to the left and tap on the left side. So it would sweep to one side on the ground and then you would pick it up and move it back, and sweep to one side on the ground, pick it up, move it back. And so that way you're only kind of doing constant contact for half the technique in one direction. Okay, does everyone kind of get?
And what is that for?
So that one particularly is for if you can shoreline, say you were walking along a sidewalk, and the edge of the sidewalk was very, there was a big drop on that side.
Okay.
Okay. So you would want to slide your cane along to find out exactly where that edge is. So you would drag the cane to the edge side, and you would know exactly where that edge is located. And then you would lift your cane, because now it's in the grass. The edge of the cane's in the grass. You would pick it up and move it to the other side. It's not important.
Oh, okay.
You know what I mean? So that way you didn't always have it on the ground. You don't need it on the ground, but you really need to know where that edge is. The edge is important.
Yeah.
So another case you would use this one, and you could either use touch or constant contact, or this one is if you're walking along sidewalk and then you run into a driveway and you just need to get across the driveway, but you don't necessarily need, you just don't want to veer into or away from the driveway. You just want to stay along your sidewalk. There's that crack or that split, the driveway line where the sidewalk is and the driveway ends, that keeps going past where the grass ends, and it will resume, the grass will resume right on that line. You can use this touch and drag technique to find where that crack is. And now that's your shoreline. If it's big enough, you roll across it and you find it and you keep following that, and you move your cane back over in the air, and then you move it, you drag it over, find that crack, and you can use that now as your edge to follow.
Okay.
But this technique is a great technique to use while shorelining. You would use this one for that. So this one's called the touch and drag. Some other places may call this one touch and slide or something else, but it's for our purposes, we're going to call it the touch and drag. Okay. All right. So any other questions on the touch and drag? Let me see here. I'm also going to add, 1 second. Nate co-host. Okay. All right.
Thank you, Nathan.
Yeah, thanks. Sorry about that. I forgot about that part. All right. So touch and drag. Next technique we're going to talk about is called the 3-point touch. So we have the diagonal technique, which I guess you could really call the 1-point touch because you're only keeping it in one spot. So if you really wanted to be cheeky and funny, you could call it the 1-point touch. The 2-point touch is where you tap it back and forth. We have this other technique called the 3-point touch, which is specifically used when you have, well, let me describe it first, and then I'll tell you when to use it. So imagine you are walking along a street and you're you've got street on one side and grass. You're on the street side and you're just sweeping your cane like Juanita talked about. You're just staying to the edge. You're shorelining that grass so you can stay out of the road. Now imagine there's a curb that ends up being on that street. So now not just street and grass, but you have street and you have the curb and then you have the
We're
grass.
sleeping.
Is someone snoring? Man, am I that boring? I'm sorry, I'll liven this up. Maybe I'll add some more, inflection. Or something.
Maybe it's one of your workers.
Oh yeah,
There.
man, if someone's sleeping at the lighthouse, we just opened up. Woo. Yeah.
Hi,
Okay, but-
Nathan. Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Hi,
Is
Renee.
is that Renee?
Yeah, sorry I'm late. I was at the support group meeting this morning. We
It's
just got
okay.
done.
It's okay.
Okay.
Thanks for joining, Renee.
Oh, you're welcome.
Well, 3-point touch. So we're talking about 3-point touch. So you're walking along. There's now a curb. So you have street. You have a
You're
curb
still snoring.
blocking your cane from feeling that grass. But what you really want is for that grass to eventually turn into the sidewalk because you're trying to find the sidewalk. So as you sweep toward the curb, your cane is going to hit the curb, and then the cane tip is going to go up and over the curb into the grass. So
Okay.
as you sweep toward that curb, boom, you hit the curb and then you go up and over. And then the next step, you're going to move your cane back towards the street side. And so every step, every time you go towards the curb, you'll hit the curb, you'll go up and over, and then you'll feel grass. You'll go back to street.
Okay.
Sweep towards the curb, up and over, grass. Sweep towards the street. You'll sweep towards the curb, go up and over, boom. Now you hit concrete because that's your sidewalk. You'll take one more step because remember your cane's out in front of you. You can't just turn right then and there. You're going to take one more step. And then you realize the curb is gone. There's just more concrete because you now have a curb cut. And so that's where your sidewalk is. So you move into the sidewalk from there. The 3-point touch, as you move towards the curb and you go up and over, what you're really doing is you're using that extra jump up and over move to find out what's on the other side of that curb. Is it grass? Is it concrete? What's over there? The reason why you would do that mostly is if you veered in a street crossing, right? Sometimes you're crossing the street, you might veer into your cross street or your parallel street.
Sounds like a
You
bear.
Here, you use this 3-point touch to find your way back to the sidewalk.
Okay.
Okay, so any questions or concerns about 3-point touch?
No.
Nathan, I have,
Oh,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Nathan, how wide are you doing the points?
So this one, in this technique, everything should be as wide as you would normally do with 2-point touch. just when you hit the curb, it just goes up and over. That's the only difference. So it's nearly identical to touch technique. You're just popping it over the curb and that's it.
Okay.
Yeah, it should not widen anything else. It should just be, you want to keep it as smooth and easy as possible and as similar to your other techniques as possible. It's just, once you hit the curb, up and over, that's it. That's the only difference. I wish there was a Michael were in on these calls, because he actually uses this in one of his routes every single day. He'll use the same technique, because we worked it out for this one specific point in the route that he uses this 3-point touch, and it works like butter for him. It's awesome.
Okay.
But it's also a technique, once, we'll get around it. Usually we end up teaching this technique around the time of street crossings, when you start getting pretty good at street crossings.
Okay.
After we teach you street crossings, if you have not veered yet, then we teach you what it feels like to veer, because you need to know what that feels like. And then we teach you how to fix it using this
Okay.
technique. So, there may be other uses for this technique out there somewhere. But this is pretty
Oh,
much
God.
the big one. Fixing a veer.
Sounds like a bear.
Yeah, it does.
I think somebody needs to mute themselves,
Yeah. Is
Really?
that,
because if I
Somebody
mute you,
does.
then you will have to unmute yourself if you want to speak.
okay.
We're hearing some noise in the background. And who's on the phone that ends in 0620? Who number is that? 941 457 0620. Who is on?
Me,
Nope, not
Gail,
me.
Gail, Gail.
Gail?
Yeah,
I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
Gail.
Gail, Gail.
Gail.
Okay, Gail. GAIL?
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, we're just getting a list, Gail, of everybody.
Yes.
who's in on
Okay.
the
And
call.
what's your last name, Gail?
Slater, SCHLADER.
SCH. Okay,
LA.
okay, thank you.
Uh-huh.
Okay,
Okay.
sorry, Nathan.
No worries. All right. So 3-point touch. Any questions on this particular one? There are some issues you're going to run into with 3-point touch. Let me cover those. And one is, when people veer in a street crossing, their initial instinct is to just jump the curb and get out of the road. I would urge you not to do that, for the sole reason that over the curb, if you just kind of jump the curb to get out of the road, you may, there could be like a really steep bank that you fall down. There
Right.
are often street signs right at street corners telling drivers all sorts of things. And usually they're positioned in a way that if you jump the curb, the sign might be at face level and pointed kind of at your face. Just the way
Okay.
they are, the way they're
Mhm.
positioned. And so you run the risk of actually poking yourself in the eye or walking face first into those signs. You could, you could walk into one of those cables that hold up the power lines, because sometimes they have those diagonal cables. There's just a lot of stuff that tends to be right over the curbs at street corners. So I would kind of say, try not to do that. Try to find your sidewalk and use this technique to find it. Another problem you'll have is if it's heavy traffic, you may get really nervous, that you're there. That's perfect. It's absolutely 100% normal. Just, take that breath and use the technique, use it right, and get out of the road as quick as you can.
Right.
Another thing you might run into is because you veered in that street crossing, you're using this 3-point touch, you're in the gutter. And if it has rained, you're going to be standing in water. And that just is what it is. It's unavoidable at that point.
Mm-hmm.
You use the technique right, slide it through the water to the curb and go up and over. You don't want to try. I've had someone tell me they tried to walk around this big puddle, and then later they showed me where that puddle was, and they were in the middle of the street because that puddle was huge.
Oh,
So at that point I was
Okay.
like, this puddle's so big. I get wanting to walk around, but at that point, if you're in the middle of the street, you should just be in the water at that point.
yeah.
And I'm sorry, it sucks. You could go home and have some tomato soup and grilled cheese or something, get yourself warmed up and dry. But you don't want to be in the middle of the street. But those are some problems you may run into while using this technique, just given that this technique is used to correct a street crossing problem. So,
Okay.
so there's that. But that's 3-point touch. You slide to the curb side, bounce your cane up and over, and then back, slide your cane over, and that's what it is.
Right.
Okay, so this other technique is this next one I'm going to talk about. I've heard it called different things. So if Latricia, if you've got another name for this, that I don't know, we'll try and do all the names, but this is this weird ambiguous technique that has kind of been, I don't know if it was created randomly by one of my professors in college, or what, but it's either called the touch and push or the touch and slide.
Touch and
So
slide.
Okay.
I've heard touch and slide
touch and slide.
and touch and drag is.
Yeah,
touch and
because touch and drag, again, the names for these, depending on where you're at, get kind of muddled, I think.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
we'll call this touch and slide for now.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. So what this technique is, again, when I started the last session with this, I talked about how touch technique is the basis for all other techniques. Everything comes off of touch.
Mhm.
So you have to have that touch technique dialed in pretty well. And then you can add these things on and they make sense. So touch and slide is one of those offshoot techniques. It's almost identical to touch technique. Everything's almost exactly the same. Except you're going to move a little slower with this technique. What happens is when you move your cane to one side, what you're going to do is you're actually going to push the cane tip forward about an inch or two, straight out in front from where you hit. When you move your cane back to the other side, you're going to push it forward straight out in front about an inch or two. That's all you're going to do is just slide that cane tip forward every time you hit. So same thing as touch technique. It's just as wide. Everything's the same. You're just pushing that tip on the ground forward. The goal for this technique is normally you're trying to find something very specific on the ground. You're
Okay.
really close. And
Right.
what you're using, you haven't found it yet.
Is
So
is that for like if you drop something on the ground?
that one's different, Dana. What this one is
Okay.
like is if you're looking for an escalator is made of
Oh, okay.
metal. There's like a metal plate in front of it all the way around, and you're on tile or something. And then you would use this because you know if you push your cane tip forward, once you hit that metal, it's going to create like a scraping sound that will be
Okay.
really good to hear. If you're trying to find truncated domes, you're at the intersection, this technique will kind of help you find it because your cane is going to snag on the edge of those domes, or it may snag in the domes themselves. But
Okay.
you're really trying to use that pushing of the cane forward to find that new surface. And that's what this one will do. Because you're pushing it forward, you got to move slower. And because you're looking for something in particular, you're going to want to slow down your speed anyway. You're not going to be, go on warp speed and trying this touch and slide technique, because you'll probably snag your cane, and then that cane handle will go straight into your solar plexus, and you'll be knocked out, or you'll be on the ground sucking wind because you knocked the wind out of yourself. And so you would slow way down, and you're really searching. This is a really good searching skill, as you're just trying to find something in particular.
Okay.
I have found that this technique, if you are traveling, which none of us will have this problem for the most part, in the snow, if you are using this technique
Really?
with a pencil tip on your cane, there's a lot of times you'll have snow on the ground, and you use this technique, and it can kind of dig through that layer of snow, find your concrete, and you can use this a little bit better than touch technique in the snow. I love this technique in the snow.
What if you have a ball on the end?
So it doesn't work as well with the ball. So what
Okay.
I would suggest in the snow is use either the pencil tip or the Dakota disc. I would change the tip you've got completely. The Dakota disc is really good, but with the fact that it goes over the top of the snow, a lot of times, who was telling me, was it James you were telling me you're from Michigan or Minnesota? Yeah, Michigan.
Michigan,
Okay,
yeah.
so
I was thinking about the ice too.
right, because sometimes you have the snow, and this is getting a little, it's weird for Florida, but here's some information about snow that people might not know. A lot of times you'll have snow and it has like a crust on top. For whatever reason, maybe it rained, it like sleeted or something on top of some fresh fallen snow. Maybe it snowed and then it melted a little bit and then it got cold again. Or maybe, for whatever reason, there's kind of a crust.
Right.
So the Dakota disc goes over the top, and that's great. But say you're trying to find an intersecting sidewalk, your Dakota disc is not going to find that sidewalk. This touch and slide technique will go through that crust of the snow, so you can stay on your sidewalk and try and find that intersecting sidewalk. If you've got like down here, we could talk about if there's a bunch of sand. So like say you're walking along, you're near the beach, and sand has kind of blown over the sidewalks. This touch and slide technique would work well in that sand to stay on the sidewalk and not wander off the sidewalk. Like if the sand has like caused like a dune to blow over the sidewalk and you get a little lost. This touch and slide, I would use the touch and slide. So any questions on touch and slide? No, got nothing.
I brought up something well back, slanted sidewalks.
Yes.
So I brought that up a while back, and I didn't know what, like you run to a sidewalk and it's slanted halfway, partway down.
Yes. Okay, so what slanted in which direction? To the side, to the front?
Well, like in the center, yeah, to the side.
Okay, yeah, some of those happen around here where your sidewalk is slanted. You normally towards the street, which is terrible because that makes you want to drift that way.
Mhm.
But whenever you're running across an uneven surface, the first thing you have to do is understand that it's there. So you have to use your feeling on the ground that, hey, that I'm slanted. That's one of the parts that makes traveling with a visual impairment so exhausting, is you're always paying attention to a lot of things.
Mhm.
And so paying attention to how your weight feels distributed on your body is just, it normally happens because normally what you'll do is you'll start to lean one way. You'll be walking along, the sidewalk will slope, and then you'll just naturally start to lean one way or the other, so that you don't fall over. When that starts to happen, pay attention to it because it's telling you something. Most people don't pay attention to it, and so they never really gain that info. But anytime your body position has to change to compensate for the sidewalk, I would track it. So that way, okay, if I know about 10 or 12 steps back, the sidewalk started to veer to my left. And now I'm kind of lost. Right. But I paid attention to when it started happening. So I'm going to turn around and go back to that point about 10 or 12 steps to where that started, and then see if I can figure out what happened back there. But does that help at all, James?
Yes.
Okay.
Nathan,
Yes.
I do have a quick question.
Sure.
So with using both canes, for me, it's like, okay, I step. So how do I when do I step forward with using both canes? I have a difficult time with trying to use both canes stepping at the same time. How do I manage to do that?
Right.
Both.
So both canes are going to be moving at the same time. It's kind of, so you have to take each cane independently of the other cane at first to think about how it works, right? So here, let me 1 second. Yeah, there we go. So first thing you would do is you would take your support cane. Your support cane normally would be opposite of whatever side it needs to be, of whatever side needs. So say you're more unstable on your left.
Okay.
Is that the case for you, or is it just kind of there for all of the instability?
I think my right side is the more I have trouble with.
Gotcha. Do you have you and Rosemary figured out which side your cane should be on, which hands you should be holding each one with?
I use the support cane with my left hand. With my left hand, I use the mobility cane with my right hand.
Okay, perfect. So we'll go with that. So support cane's in your left. Support cane should go forward when your right foot goes forward. So the opposite foot, right?
Okay.
So your support cane should be moving opposite of whatever leg is going forward. There was this show, House. I don't know if anyone's ever seen that one. It was on for a long, long time.
Yes.
But the main character, House, he always walked around with a cane and support cane, and he always moved it with his injured side. And the U.S. Physical Therapists Association used to write him letters weekly, write the show weekly, because that's wrong. You don't want to walk that way, because if you do, you can actually cause yourself problems. And then he has back problems from that show, from doing that show for so many years. His back is all messed up from walking like that. But so what you do is you move opposite the cane, just like your other cane, right? So if your right leg goes forward, the support cane goes forward.
Okay, and so how far out does the mobility cane need to be
The
while
mobility
using?
cane should be used exactly like we talked about it at the beginning of this session. So,
Okay.
but that one should go the other direction. So what you're gonna find when you're using two canes at once
Mhm,
is on one step, both canes are gonna seem like they come together.
mhm.
Your support cane will go forward, and then your mobility cane will come to that side. And then on the next step, they're gonna come apart because your support cane will stay where it's at as you take the step, and then your mobility cane will go back the other way. And so it almost seems like they come together and come apart and come together and come apart. But that's to keep it step. But like I said, it's hard walking with two canes. So you're gonna have to practice with this to get better at it. It is because you're thinking about a lot of things with those canes.
Mhm.
But you want to get really good at using both canes so that you don't have to think about it anymore.
Okay.
That's the point where you know you can stop really focusing on it, is when you don't have to. If you're still thinking about what you should be doing, you need to practice more.
Okay.
It should become like as automatic as breathing. All right.
All right. Thank you.
Yep. Okay. Last thing we will cover is what you do, the two things you do, or whatever, however many things, is what you do with the cane when you encounter an object. So you've been walking, you're using the cane. Its whole purpose in life is to bump into stuff so that you don't, and boom, you bumped into something. What do you do now? Okay. So anybody have any ideas?
Can you say that one more time so I can
So
get it?
what do you do with the cane? Now you've used your touch technique or constant contact to
Mhm.
keep yourself from bumping into something, and then your cane hits something. What do you do now?
I stop and then try to readjust.
Okay,
Yeah, like or back or back up a little bit.
right,
Kind
okay. You back up, then what do you do?
you can like use the tap what's that called? Can't keep forgetting what that
Oh, just whichever technique,
yeah
right?
yeah
Yeah.
yeah
Mhm.
to figure out which way to go or which
Okay,
way to
good.
turn.
You go around, right?
Mhm,
I mean,
mhm.
that's what you're
Right.
saying, right? Juanita?
Yeah.
You just, your goal is to walk around. So
Yeah.
that's one of two goals, right? You either are looking for something and you want to hit it, or you're not looking for something, you hit it and you want to get around. So
Yeah.
that's the key. Is, say it's like a garbage can, you're walking along the sidewalk, it's garbage day, it's just sitting there, it's gonna happen. You just want to get around it. So all you're gonna do is, using that same technique, you're just gonna keep tapping on that side. It now becomes your shoreline. You're just gonna make your way around it and then continue on with your way. I think what I find a lot of people do, especially in the beginning of cane training, is they want to touch it with their hand. And I like, especially if it's garbage day, I'm gonna urge you,
Not to touch the
just
garbage.
do not touch the garbage can. Because I've seen some of the garbage cans in Florida, and believe me when I tell you, you don't want to.
Yes.
So
No way.
if it is not the exact thing that you're looking for, just get around it.
Yeah.
And I get it when you're starting training, and I would do it when you're starting training. You hit a new object and it makes a new sound. And then you hit another new object and it makes another new sound. You want to touch
Yeah.
because you're like, well, what is that? And so that's all well and good. But after the training phase, when you're just like, hey, I'm just trying to get to the bus stop, just get around it. You don't have to touch everything in that occasion. Even to confirm it, try and be able to confirm your landmarks. If you can confirm it by just your cane in your ears, then there's no need to touch it. But you know, that's one of two things you would do. You would literally just get around it. If it's a car parked along the side of the road, what I might do in that case is not tap on it every single step. Because I've seen people sitting in cars along the side of the road, and now you're just beating their car up with your cane. If given the choice, I would trail with my hand, and the way you do it so that it's nice and light and it's less intrusive, because if someone's sitting in their car, it's a nice car, and then you're walking around and your hands are all over it, they might get upset. I mean, it's just people are
Yeah.
people. I just washed this. So as you trail, use the back of your hand, like just the backs of your
Yeah.
knuckles, nice, soft. And then you're just going to kind of walk around it with the back of your hand against their thing. That way you're not putting fingerprints on it. It's a lot less intrusive. You know, something like that. If you're walking around like a big, if it's a big truck, like a landscaping truck or something, if it's huge, put your arm up. You know, the upper body protection, you're going to protect your upper body, because a lot of times those trucks have like branches and all kinds of junk hanging off the back that your cane will not find. It'll just be your face. Your face will find it for some reason. But so all those trucks and all those things, you want to keep the hand up. But if it's a smaller car, just use the back of your hand to trail. All right, so say you encounter an object that you actually were looking for, that was the goal, like a door or stairs going down or something like that. You've encountered this thing and you want to know what it is. What do you do then?
The down. So it's on of my tongue. Oh my.
And Juanita's crushing it. She's always answering.
So like, so can you say it one more time so I can get it?
So like, say you're walking along a sidewalk, it's going to a building, you're trying to get in the building, and then you're at the door, your cane hits the door. What do you do then? Like, how do you do it? What happens?
You tap on it.
Okay, you tap it. It's there. What next?
Look for the doorknob.
Look for the doorknob. Okay.
Yeah.
So what I see a lot of people do, especially in the beginning, is their cane will hit. So you
Like,
now know you're about 2 steps away from that door, right? Your cane.
Cause some doors have like a little thing at the bottom of it.
Right.
So
right.
yeah. So you know, like when you up against the door with your cane. So that's what I mean by tapping. Like,
that's it. Yeah. Up against the door. That's the key right there.
Yeah.
So people will run into the door with their cane, and then their hand will immediately come up and they'll start pawing the air.
Yeah.
Right. They'll start trying to look for the thing, but you're using your hand to find this thing, and then you kind of Frankenstein your way with your arm forward till you hit the door. So with your cane is like one-stop shop. It's an all-purpose tool. You're holding your cane, you're in touch technique, your hand's in front of you, cane hits the door. What you want to do at that point, you already know exactly where the door is. 1, because your cane tip is touching it, and 2, because your finger is pointed down the flat side of your cane handle. So you're pointing right to the door with your finger. So what you're going to do is now you're going to leave your cane tip at the door, and you're going to walk. We call it walking up to vertical. You're going to walk towards your cane tip with it planted, and then your cane will be vertically in front of you. It will be a
Cause
barrier
you
between you
cause
and
you can't just gonna automatically lead you where the direction is. Like,
exactly.
yeah,
That's it. It's already there. So you just go
Yeah.
to where it is.
yeah,
So your cane tip will know. So you walk your cane handle up to vertical. So now it's vertically in front of you.
Mhm.
And then if you need to find a door handle or something, your cane is now vertically in front of you. Just sweep it back and forth like a windshield wiper
Mhm.
along the door. Eventually it's going to hit the handle or somewhere on that handle, and you'll feel where it is because the cane will hit it in a certain spot. And then you can follow that cane down with your other hand to find the handle. But the key is walk your cane up to vertical. Leave your tip planted where it's at, and you'll walk up to it. This technique, just walking up to vertical, you should practice this. Everyone with a cane should practice this and be able to know exactly where and how your cane feels when you're at vertical. As you stand there, if you're just standing, most people will just stand and they'll be holding their cane in front of them, kind of clutched to their chest, and it will be at vertical. So they know exactly what it feels like for their cane to feel like that. The reason
up
why
and
this,
down.
yeah, it's so important because this is how you will find stairs going down.
Mhm.
And if you don't know what this feels
Mm.
like and you can't quite get there, then you're going to walk beyond your cane and you're going to fall down those steps. And nobody wants that. Trust me. We want you to
Okay.
stop right at your cane, and then your cane should be the barrier between you and everything else. Your cane has already swept the ground in front of you, so you know there's no danger, hopefully. And so walking up to vertical just closes the gap between the area you've already checked and everything else in the world. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Being a vertical. So if what I tell people when I get the cane first, the first two things I normally teach, or three, I teach them all about the cane. I just talk about it. We did a Zoom lesson months ago, where I talked for an hour about just canes, and people were kind of like, man, that was boring. Some
I
people
enjoy
liked it,
it.
but it was just a lot of talk about canes, and I'll talk about canes. Then I'll talk about how to do diagonal inside. And then I'll talk about having them practice walking their cane up to vertical. Every new surface, plant your cane tip, walk up to vertical. And so you want to have that down. That should be one of those techniques you get and you practice, and you know you could do that at any point in any time. Whatever you hit, you can walk it up to vertical. It's one of the more important techniques, I think, safety wise. But practice it on flat ground first. All right, so that is about all of the techniques that I can think of on flat ground. Latricia, do you have any more? I don't know if you're.
Thank you. No, I think you covered it.
Okay. If
Thank you
there,
so much.
if there are more, I'll let you guys know, but
Yeah, I think you did a good job.
yeah, there are a lot of techniques. You get a cane and you're like, hey, I'm gonna use this cane. Let me
Right.
get at it. But there's a lot to do. There's a
Right.
lot.
And that's what I tell clients. You may not use all of these techniques all the time. But it's just nice to know them depending on what situation you're in.
Mhm.
You have a tool, we always talk about having your tool, keeping your box equipped. So you have various techniques that you can actually, do or try, depending on what type of terrain you're walking on and also what type of situation you may encounter. It's just good to know them.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep. All right. So any questions, any things that anybody wants to go over again, or?
Oh, you did good.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Good,
guys.
Nathan.
Yeah, I had fun today. I learned more than I know. So I really
Yeah, so it's cool when next time you see your O&Ms or if you want to practice these,
Right.
let them know, because it's all good sitting here talking about it.
Mhm.
But like actually doing it is
Yep.
a whole nother thing. And getting the sensation and feeling from your cane, the feedback from it will be important. So,
Alrighty.
all right, guys.
Already.
Thanks,
There's no questions.
Nathan.
Thank you for joining
Thanks,
us.
Patricia.
All right.
We will
Nathan, I just want to say that I hope you and Latrish have a very happy Thanksgiving, and thank you a
Yeah,
lot.
you guys have a nice Thanksgiving, you
We're
guys.
gonna try. I'm gonna try